Dear all, we are in advance to what we have forecasted, but nobody else is left at the buffet, so I guess we can start with whoever is left is here. So thank you for having stayed until now. This last section of our Info Day 2025. And it is my pleasure to enter in the truly more technical part of the Info Day. As announced this morning, we will talk about the IT dimension, the e-tool, the many questions on the e-tool. We'll talk about the phases of the process. So, without further ado, I will introduce you one of our heroes, the hero of the e-tool, which is Netcompany, that will be presented today by Philippe Babalis, which is a senior project manager at Netcompany, and Savas Saroukas, which is the lead engineer, the real operative, let's say, not even more than practitioner, magician behind the e-tool, who will introduce the tool and tell you whatever you have always wanted to ask and never dared to do. So here to you are Philip and Savas.
Testing. Thank you very much for joining us in this session, and thank you very much for introducing us. I myself and Savas are from Netcompany. Netcompany is an IT service provider supporting European Union institutions. Over the years, Netcompany has focused on building systems that are essential to both society and business. Solutions that improve public services, streamline operations, and help organizations adapt in an increasingly digital world. I think next slide. Oh, yes. Okay. Our work spans across several core business areas. First, we provide application development and integration services, designing and implementing tailored systems that fit complex organizational needs. We deliver managed services, ensuring that critical IT environments remain stable, secure, and continuously optimized. We also, through our scope services, we support information and communication operations across large institutions. We invest heavily in research and development, and we help clients explore emerging technologies and prepare for future challenges. And finally, our IT resourcing services allow organizations to scale their teams and specialize expertise wherever it's needed. Together, this enables Netcompany to support a digital transformation end-to-end, making us a trusted partner across the EU ecosystem. The ERA Talent Platform. We are engaged in the development and maintenance of the ERA platform. We focus on creating a clearer and more user-friendly platform that makes information easy to access. We integrate key European tools and services to provide researchers effectively, to support researchers effectively while ensuring the platform delivers high speed, stability, and responsiveness. We also automate data collection as you have seen, analysis and reporting to improve efficiency and accurately. Finally, we simplify page structures, enhance visualization so users can quickly find what they need based on theme or target group. And now, my colleague Savas will dwell into the technicalities and the operational aspect of the item in question.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Savas Sarouchas. It's a real pleasure to be with you here today. Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, I'm going to present the new features of the HR Excellency Research. Our team has been working really hard in making the tool efficient and more user-friendly. Our focus has been twofold. From the one side, we wanted to address your feedback, and on the other side, align our digital tools with the evolving landscape of the European Charter for Research Policies. I will cover key enhancements from user access and platform navigation to the core e-tool itself. The first major enhancement that we started with last year was the integration with the EU login. Sorry. Since July 2024, we have created a hybrid model of logging into our user access and the HR Excellency Research. Sorry, I am trying to... I'm a little bit nervous. I haven't done this for a long time ago. This move to the EU login, the move to the single sign-on system provides us with better access, secure access for the users. It strengthens security and aligns with the European Commission standards policy. You already can log into the system with two different ways. One with the Your Access login and with the EU login, since it's a hybrid model. But we strongly suggest to switch to the EU login as we are gradually phasing out the Your Access credentials. The way to switch to the EU login is that for new users, it's very easy. You have to create a new account and then log into the system, and the two accounts are going to be merged together. Your account is going to be created automatically. And for our existing community, there is simple options. If your access email matches the EU login email, the system will automatically merge these two accounts together when you log in. If it doesn't, you have different emails, then you have two options. You can either create a new EU login account and then log into the system, which is the recommended one, or you can contact the help desk for a manual update. This option, of course, is a little time-consuming because of the many checks that are required from the help desk to verify your accounts and your credentials. In the login, you can see clearly, in the login page, you can see clearly that the emphasis is given in the EU login, and we also keep the traditional EU access account, but this is going to be phased out sometime next year. Now that we have talked about how you log into the system, let's see where you land. HR Excellency Research now has a new home, a distinct, dedicated space on its own. This decision was made to create a distinct digital home for HR Excellency Research with its own menu, separating its functions from the Your Access portal. The way to find this new home is either from a relevant platform initiative or from the Your Access menu itself. Now, since we created, this is actually the new landing page of the HR Excellency Research platform. Even though we created a distinct space for HR excellency research, it is crucial to understand how this relates to your access. Even though your access and HR excellency research are two separate initiatives, they are deeply interconnected. They use a common database for organizations, members, users, contracts, cases. They also use the same code base. This provides us with two key benefits: enhanced security, meaning that the security updates, critical security updates, are applied simultaneously to both platforms, and operational consistency, which means that system-wide events and maintenance are synchronized. Now let's dive into the e-tool itself. The e-tool has been renovated. We changed the user interface to create a customized workplace for its different role. For organization administrators, you get direct portal to your HR award case. For experts, you get a workspace where you can manage your availability, access your assessments, and review your history of assessments. For EC administrators and reviewers, we created a comprehensive command center where they can oversee the entire process. We also updated the HR award case itself. Historically, the HR award case was organized visually by phase and cycle, and each task was displayed as a box with all the relevant forms in it. Now, the HR award case is displayed as a timeline. It's still organized as in phases and cycles, and phases, yes. And the task itself is just a summary box containing the title of the task, the person who is responsible for the task, the deadline or submission date, and the status. If you want to work on the task, you have to click on the title, and a dedicated page will be loaded with all the relevant forms in it. This on-demand loading of the page and the tasks was a technical improvement, was a big technical improvement, because it helped us overcome performance bottlenecks we used to see, as now the system doesn't have to calculate a lot of permissions for all the tasks in the page. Now, the next topic that I would like to address is the most difficult one, is the transition to the 20 principles of the European Charter of Researchers. Michele, you are laughing? Yes, yes. As you know, we are moving from a framework of 40 principles to the one of the 20. The key date to remember about this is the 26th of November, 2024. All new cases created after this date will automatically use the new 20 principle framework. For existing cases, the transition to the 20 principles framework is determined by the acceptance date of your previous assessment. I'm going to be very clear on this. I'm going to say that, for example, if your previous assessment is completed before the 26th of November, then you will continue your current phase using the 40 principles framework. If the assessment is completed after the 26th of November, you will start using the new principles. It's going to transition to the new 20 principles framework. This is the action plan and how the 20 principles are incorporated within the form. If you're still on the 40 principles framework, you're going to see the 40 principles in the bottom. Now, there are a few crucial points to remember about this transition. Unfortunately, there wasn't been an easy way to map the 40 principles to the 20. So the organization administrators, upon transition, they will have to complete their gap analysis and their action plan from the beginning, from scratch. All the old actions in the action plans are going to be removed, and you have to select again new ones. This is actually a one-time process because all the forms are going to be copied in subsequent cycles. Second, there is no choice for the user. The system will automatically detect, based on the transition rules, whether to use the new framework or the old. And finally, you're going to keep all the previous forms are going to be in this tool for reference, for user reference, if you want to go back and check your work. I would like to show us a couple of examples just to make sure that everybody can understand what the transition is about. Let's assume that the previous assessment is completed before the transition date, which was 26th of November, and you are in the internal review for renewal assessment. So if the interim assessment was accepted before the 26th, 2004, the internal review for renewal assessment will use the 40 principles. In this scenario, based on the second scenario, if we were in the first cycle of a renewal phase and the assessment is accepted after the 26th of November, then the user will use the new framework. There is one point to make here, that the transition will never occur in the interim phase. I mean, if the assessment is accepted in the initial phase, either after or before, the interim phase will still use the 40 principles because it is just a pass-through phase. The transition will always happen either for a new case instantly or in the renewal phase. One final point on the transition is that the transition to the 20 principles will never occur during a resubmission. This means that if your previous assessment is pending modifications, you will have to continue to resubmit using the framework that you started with. Now, beyond the transition to the 20 principles of European Charter for Researchers, we provide more further improvements of the e-tool version 2. One of them was making the gap analysis and the OTMR living documents. Historically, those documents were initially completed during the initial phase of the HR Excellency research, and they were never touched. They were left as is. Now, both of these documents were going to be available for all phases and cycles. The organization administrator will have to review the documents, save them before they submit their internal reviews. This ensures that all of the documents remain updated with the current policy. Unfortunately, at the moment, there is no way to merge those two forms together. I remember we had the feedback on this one. People wanted to merge those two documents together. At the moment, we're thinking about it, but we're considering ways of doing it. This is actually how it's going to look, how the internal review is going to be displayed with OTMR and gap analysis forms in the internal review for renewal assessment. Now, apart from the gap analysis and the OTMR, further enhancements have been introduced to the tool. There's a new way of managing your action plan across phases, between cycles. Only incomplete tasks are going to be moved from the one cycle to the next. We have revised also the resubmission rules, meaning that pending modifications now have 2 resubmissions instead of 1. This gives to the organization administrators 3 total submissions, 1 initial and 2 potential resubmissions. Keep in mind that if all submissions are negative, the organization will lose. The HR award will be suspended for the organization. We also fixed the forms to be printable and more user-friendly. We created new email templates so that we can display more informative information and deadlines for the upcoming tasks. And we also updated the way, created a protocol to update the endorsement and commitment letter. This document was submitted only once when the case was created, but now we're giving the opportunity for the organization to update it. The way to do this is to send the endorsement and commitment letter to the HR Excellence, to the EC administrator or the reviewer, who will validate and publish it. For new cases, please remember to submit your endorsement and commitment letter. Some of the organizations, some of users, we received actually some, not complaints, some questions from organizations that their case did not forward in the next step And this was because they didn't know that after creating the case, they have to submit their endorsement letter for the process to start. This is actually the way that the endorsement letter and commitment task is going to be displayed in the screen, obviously keeping the old one and providing the revised versions of it. Finally, before I close this presentation, I would like to mention that we have a protocol of replacement for HR organizations. The way to do this is that you nominate your successor, you contact and you communicate your successor with the help desk. It goes without saying that the successor has to be part of the organization that is going to be taking care of the HR excellence case. And the help desk will take care of reassigning the roles and changing the ownership of the tasks and the case itself. Actually, that is that I have today for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Savas. That was extremely informative. For the people listening to us, that's just the tip of the iceberg, because there is an enormous amount of work behind that. There are several dozens of thousands of lines of code involved, and it has been a work based, I remind that for the people online, based on a survey shared with the users. So most of these improvement changes are requested by the Commission directly, but a lot of them were requested directly by the users. So now we can actually sit together. It's here, my microphone. Okay, good. We can sit and take some questions from the audience via Slido. If you can start the Slido, please. Yes, thank you. Okay, the first question. What change in the e-tool did you like the most? Now, that's the boosting part for us, to know it, how you like architecture and simplification, user-friendliness, navigation, graphics. And in case you had the opportunity to explore the dashboard, also dashboard and statistics. We didn't speak about it, but all the users know about it. Architecture and simplification, that's a booster. Thank you. We worked very hard in that direction. Fantastic. Great. Well, actually, next time we should give more than one reply possible instead of only one, so we can see all of them going up. Okay, thank you. Is there still people replying? Yes. Okay, can we go to the second slide? Now, that's more boosting for us. It's work to do. What other development would you like to see next year on the e-tool? Already, okay. Automatic. That's also a question I received. I was going to ask it later, but since it's on screen, I will ask you, Savas, now. There are users asking if multiple admins, or at least multiple subjects, can access the same case from an institution.
Actually, we have only one organization administrator that can access the case for a specific organization. But they can use a functional email box, and they can share this email between them. They can use this one to access the case. But it is crucial that one person needs to be named as responsible for the case, so we can keep track of who is responsible for the HR excellence research case they are managing with.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, more coming in. Shortcut a tool after logging to your access. It already exists. Sava showed it before. There is a menu leading to all the initiatives of the Eurotalent platform as a shortcut. Okay, we can go to next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, though, please. Okay. What obstacles did your organization face before it could initially commit to HR excellence in research? Now, this is very important information for us, but it is actually a Slido question for the next presentation. So if you could go back, voila. These are the online questions. So are you going, oh, disappeared? Can I have it back? The online questions. Okay, yes. Are you going to produce the new technical guide in tune with the latest change in the tool? It's already uploaded. It's the new guidelines. I showed it during my presentation. I don't remember what is the second. Anyway, it's in the menu under the HR Excellence in Research. You can download, you can select that, and it is downloadable there. And these are perfectly in line with all the graphics and the correct examples from the current modification in the tool. While I check the other questions online, is there any question in the audience? They request a clarification on the transition. We have to convert the current action plan line to the updated charter or on the new action plan. Do you want me to take that? As you wish. It's more procedural than technical, this one. As Savas has explained, the action plan under the 40 principles of the charter and code will remain active under the 40 principle until the transition automatically takes place. After that moment, your institution will receive an action plan under the 20 principle as an automatic procedure. So the moment you open your case after validation of the previous assessment, it will be under the new principle, new 20 principles. Okay. A lot of questions here. Yeah. Clarification. Is there?
The deadline is the 26th of November 2024. This is the transition date. As I explained earlier, new cases created after this date are automatically started in the 20 principles, but existing cases, they will have to, the transition for existing cases depends on the assessment, the deadline, the acceptance date of the previous assessment. If it is after that date, then the current phase, they're going to start with the 20 principles. If it's not, they will keep using the old framework with the 40 principles.
Just one more clarification, because I think the operational word here is deadline. And to make it more clear, maybe we can talk of threshold in 26th of November 2024. There is no real deadline. If you are in a process, let's say in a renewal process, who is receiving, now I'm getting very technical, 2 requests for modification with extended deadline, it means that you are looking at 2 additional years under the 40 principles. So there is no deadline. The case is valid and active, and the HR award is kept. However, after positive assessment, after the 2 years, in that case, if it is positive, you will transition to a new renewal under the 20 principles. If it is not positive, you have reached the maximum amount of resubmissions, and therefore it will be suspended. So I hope I have been here and that. So I have to check these ones. This one is quite important. Templates. They're asking about templates. There are no templates anymore.
I don't understand the templates.
Okay. Once upon a time, we had a policy library where templates were available. Templates were available because the system was manual. That was before 2018. It's 7 years ago. Now, there are no templates anymore because every single action in the HR Excellence in Research Award process is done in the tool only. The current guidelines, they do have extracted or graphically all the elements existing in the new e-tool. So every single form that you have to complete in the e-tool is also present in the guidelines. It's not a template, but is fully in line with what you will see in the real e-tool. It means that in case you need to print out a form to share it with your colleagues, you can simply take the printout from the guidelines. And we have time for one or two more questions. Again, how we can submit the 20 principles. I think you will have to repeat what you said about the uploading of the gap analysis.
Okay. Upon transition to the new framework of the new 20 principles of the European Charter of Researchers, the new action plan will not contain the actions you have in the previous phase. It's going to be clean. It's also, the gap analysis is going to be empty because they are both aligning to the new 20 principles for the European Charter of Researchers. You have to complete them again from scratch. But keep in mind that this is only a one-time process. As I explained earlier, once you complete the forms, these are going to stay in the system and they're going to be copied from cycle to cycle and submission to submission.
Any question from our room? Yes, one question there. Can you bring the microphone? Thank you.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Ines Samami from Sorbonne University. I have a question. When the transition, do we need to do a gap analysis again? Or can we just put the old one? Or do we have to update everything? The gap analysis, do we need to do we need to put another letter of endorsement and just for the gap analysis almost?
The gap analysis is going to be new because it's going to contain only the new 20 principles. And since there are no direct mapping from the 40 to 20 principles, you will have to complete it again from the beginning. It's going to be empty.
But do you have to conduct another gap analysis of the situation in my institution?
After the new one?
Yes.
No, it's going to be copied from face to face.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, every following action. It will work exactly like it works now. After the the only exception is the transition, when you have to re-encode, and since no mapping, as Sava said, is possible, you have to redo it. After that, it's exactly as it is now. It will be important in the following phases. If there is no other question, let's see if there isn't. Oh, there are more here. One more questions from the audience. Oh, that is nice, and we can reply. Really, okay, let me take it on screen. We really need to be able to work outside the e-tool, to be able to work with, it's on the top now, to work with our researchers. A template would be useful. As I said before, you can print the relevant page from the guidelines. Or can you, actually, can you print out, even without filling, the print option will be available, you can print directly, yeah? Can say more?
Yes, you can print directly the action plan, whatever form you want, you can print it empty as it is, as it displayed to you. But remember, you have to fill it in electronically. in order to submit it. You cannot submit hard copy of documents. You need to submit it via the task.
And if no other questions, okay. A word of caution on the use of the e-tool for our practitioners?
Word of caution. Use the guidelines. Use the guidelines.
Okay. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thanks, Savas. Thank you, Philip. Voila. Justin, can you... Up to you.
Okay, so I would like to welcome Sylvia to the stage just now. Sylvia is going to present our second last presentation of the day before we move on to closing comments. So Sylvia is a senior research advisor in the International Research Office and a member of the Ethics Committee in, I pronounced this wrong, Ca' Foscari University of Venice. And Sylvia also acts as, like myself, as a reviewer of institutions going through the renewal phase. Okay, thank you, Sylvia.
Okay. Oops. Okay, thank you, Justin. And good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining this session. My name is Silvia Zabeo. I work at Ca' Foscari University of Venice in Italy, and I have been an assessor and lead assessor for about 10 years. So over the past years, I have worked with institutions all around Europe at different stages of the HR award process, from those taking their very first steps to the ones preparing their renewals after years of implementation. So today I would like to share with you a set of practical, experience-based insights on how to approach two key milestones of the HR excellence process. The initial phase, when an institution enters the process for the first time, and the interim assessment, which takes place about 2 years after receiving the award. Many of you are here because you're asking yourselves, where do we start? How do we prepare the documentation? And what do assessors expect? And how can we avoid unnecessary difficulties? My aim in this session is to give you clear and actionable answers to those questions, not only drawing from the official guidelines, but also on the collective experience of the assessors community, most of whom are senior researchers or research managers or HR managers. So people who have a deep understanding of the institutional realities you face. So, before going into technicalities, let me briefly clarify what the HR award process is fundamentally about. It is sometimes mistakenly perceived as an administrative exercise, a set of forms to fill in, a badge to earn, and a compliance task. But those who work through it properly, as we saw this morning, discover that this is something more than this. The HR award means engaging into a continuous improvement process. It invites institutions to look at themselves honestly and constructively, asking what kind of environment are we offering to our researchers, and which are our current strengths, and where are our gaps, and what concrete steps can we take to support better research careers. It is a process that aligns the institutions with the European Charter and Code. Now, European Charter for Researchers. But most importantly, it pushes institutions to grow structurally, culturally, and also strategically. Because the HR Excellence in Research Award is only the recognition, it is a culmination, but it can be also a starting point, because the true value lies not only in the award, but also in the internal transformation all along the way. So, drawing on experience, I can confidently say that the institutions, as we saw today, that engage seriously in the HR process can experience very tangible benefits, both internally and externally. As internal benefits, first of all, an increased coordination inside the institution, because the HR process requires HR units, research departments, doctoral schools, ethics offices, and above all, researchers, to sit together and reflect collectively. And this is extremely powerful. And in many institutions, this is the first time this takes place. And people collaborate systematically on research-related HR processes. Then, a stronger institutional identity, because the process fosters a more coherent internal framework, clearer procedures, shared practices, and a stronger culture of transparency and support. And then, a real understanding of your researchers' needs, because through surveys, workshops, face-to-face meetings, institutions often discover some blind spots or issues that were never clearly stated or formally known, even if widely felt by the research community. And this leads to a more targeted and evidence-based intervention. And last but not least, the professionalization of the HR and research management, because the HR process introduces monitoring and consolidates monitoring, indicators, benchmarking, self-evaluation, so increasing also the strategic capacity of the offices and research support structures. About the external benefits, today we had many evidence-based testimonies. So, first of all, an enhanced visibility and reputation, because the HR Excellence in Research Award is now recognized globally. It concretely shows commitment to transparent, merit-based recruitment and also to a supportive research environment. And then it favors the attraction and retention of talents, because researchers increasingly look for institutions that invest in their fair hiring, in their career development, and also in their well-being. Then we also saw an increased competitiveness in funding attraction, because, of course, institutions often see improvements in international funding performance after implementing their action plans, as structural improvements make research environments more robust. So, in essence, we can say that the HR award process empowers institutions from within, positioning them more strongly on the outside. Then, before going further, it is essential to address a common misconception. Assessors, as we are not evaluators. We do not score, we do not compare institutions, we do not judge performance. Our role is to take a snapshot of the situation as you describe it, to well understand your national, regional, institutional context and your current gaps, as perceived by your research community, of course. and to check whether your proposed actions are coherent and realistic and ambitious for your institution. And also, of course, to provide tailored recommendations to help you move forward. Because assessors are experienced HR managers, senior research advisors, we bring not only the guidelines, but also the institutional understanding and recommendations based on hands-on experience. Our mission is to help you progress, not to challenge or penalize you. Then, let's pass to the documentation required very quickly, because we already had a description of that. Institutions must prepare specific sets of documents according to the different stages. And let me summarize them, because this could be new for newcomers at the initial phase, or institution dealing with the interim assessment for their first time. So, for the initial phase, we have the gap analysis, identifying strengths, weaknesses, gaps in relation to the Charter of Researchers' Principles. Then the open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment checklist. So a description of your recruitment processes, transparency, and fairness, with a self-assessment of the situation against the related principles in the Charter. Action plan. So, proposed actions with timelines, responsibilities, targets, indicators, and also expected outcomes, as it was mentioned this morning. And the process description, which explains your methodology. So, how researchers were consulted, which tools were used, why you chose those tools, how the internal analysis was conducted, and how progress will be monitored. So, these documents are the foundation for the institutional commitment. For the interim assessment, of course, we reviewed the assessment of the implementation of the initial action plan. So, what has been implemented during the first 2 years, what has changed, what remains pending, with updated strengths and weaknesses, of course. And then we check also the publication of the updated action plan for the next 3 years of the cycle, with the priorities for the next cycles based also on lessons learned and current needs. Of course, an important part of the assessment will include the evidence of the continuous researcher involvement in the process, the evidence also of the visibility of the process, both at the internal level but also at the external level, with communication tools, and evidence of the fact that the HR award process is truly embedded in the institution's strategies and practices. So, this process is not about perfection. It is about reflection, it is about transparency, and if necessary, adjusting your trajectory. About the initial phase and how to approach it. So the initial phase is your institution's first in-depth look at itself through the lens of the Charter for Researchers. It works well when approached as a genuine institutional learning moment. And here are the key elements to focus on. First of all, an honest assessment, because honesty is perhaps one of the most important unwritten principles here. Assessors notice immediately when documentation is overly optimistic, when weaknesses are a bit hidden or gaps are blurred. Gaps are normal and weaknesses are normal. What matters is clarity and transparency. And then a strong methodology. So involve your research community, because they are your main stakeholders. Talk to people, listen to them, and then use appropriate tools. like anonymous researcher surveys, workshops, focus groups, interviews, documents review. Any of them can be different but effective tools for your institution. Explain why you choose them, some of them or all of them, how many people participated, and what the main findings were. So try to show, if you can, segmented results according to the research level of respondents, according to the gender, in case the respondents were administrative or academic staff, and then, of course, provide a coherent interpretation. This is where some institutions struggle, because strengths, weaknesses, and gaps, then actions, should form a consistent narrative. For example, you should make clear how you identified gaps and then how you detected them, why a weakness corresponds to a clear gap, how a gap leads directly to an action, and of course, actions should have relevant targets and quantitative and qualitative indicators. So, provide a realistic and useful action plan. A strong action plan must be grounded in the needs of the researcher community and of the institution, and must be tailored to your institution, and of course, with elements demonstrating feasibility, defining clear responsibilities distributed among units. And also, please describe how your expected outcomes will be monitored. Above all, both the identified gaps and related actions must come again from bottom-up input of the research community and endorsed by the governance. Please do not forget to show us how this happens. And then about the interim assessment. What we look for normally at this stage is the evidence of progress, because the interim assessment takes place approximately 2 years after receiving the award. And so we look for, we want to understand what has happened in the meantime, how priorities have maybe changed, what action have been implemented and to what extent, and any explanation of changes. Because delays or modifications are not a problem normally. What matters is a clear justification, because we know that institution operates in dynamic environments, budget constraints, a turnover in the leadership, a reorganization, or unforeseen external circumstances are normal. This can happen, but transparency is the key. And then the updated, again, researcher involvement, because we expect to see the updated involvement of the research community, the new needs emerging from them. Here, again, you can choose the most appropriate channels to involve them, explain us how you did it, and what your main findings are. And of course, how they relate to your updated action plan. So a good action plan at this stage should reflect the lessons learned, should adjust priorities and introduce new actions. And if any initial action has not been implemented, please explain why this happened. So the interim assessment, we can say, is where an institution shows maturity, not perfection, but reflection, adaptation, and also a commitment to continuous improvement. Then, to conclude, let me share the most practical recommendations I can give. The HR award is not just a grant office responsibility. It requires mobilizing the entire institution with the HR office fully on board and driving the process. Some staff in some institutions may not speak English, which could be a first gap to be addressed. And instead, at the same time, for more mature institutions, gaps and goals will be quite different. So, be transparent and contextualize well your situation. Explain also your national or regional situation in case if it's relevant, because it matters. And then build a clear logic from identified gaps to actions, because this is the backbone of the entire assessment. And use robust and well-explained methodology, because as we said before, surveys, workshops, focus groups can be meaningful, and together with the main findings must be well described. Again, involve researchers, not symbolically, but meaningfully. And then describe your indicators effectively. They are not only deliverables, as sometimes we see. They must help monitoring your progress during the journey. And at the interim phase, explain changes honestly, because transparency supports a fair and constructive assessment. And last but not least, please treat the HR award process as a strategic opportunity, because this way your institution can gain much more than the award. So, thank you very much for your attention and good luck with this journey.
Sylvia, thank you so much. I might just ask you to remain on the stage because we're going to take some questions from the audience and questions from colleagues working remotely. The first thing we're going to do, as people are thinking of very meaningful questions for you, is to move to Slido. And we have some word clouds and, oh, this is gone already. Okay. So this was one that appeared briefly earlier on. The question that's asked is, what obstacles did your organization face before it could initially commit to HR excellence in research? So some responses already in there. And this resonates with points that were made earlier on. Daniel was talking about the importance of ensuring that there's a mandate from senior management, the most senior management within your organization, to fully embed this process and to support it at an operational level. And if that mandate isn't there, it can become actually just impossible for any unit or any individual to drive it continuously for years. Yeah, so it's really, really demonstrated in the response to the survey here.
Yeah, to take the management on board is crucial for the good development of the HR process, I think. But I see also the lack of resources, because sometimes it is difficult to dedicate a unit for the management of the HR process, but still explain the situation to us, and according to the ambition of your action plan on the current situation, I think that even with a lack of resources, an institution could commit to the Charter for Researchers Principles.
Yeah, okay. Can we move on to the next Slido exercise? What are the key challenges you faced during the initial phase? This is a word cloud, so what thoughts spring to mind in terms of the initial implementation and challenges that you faced at that time? I see.
In our case,
yes,
because
yes.
I also think about my institution, it was a change of mindset, you know, because, yeah, you must start cooperating together, sit together, listen, reflecting.
Yeah.
And sometimes in the day-to-day management, this can be difficult.
Yeah.
But then if you find space for this, then you can really grow.
Yeah, there's a very strong theme coming through there about the inclusion of a range of stakeholders across engaging researchers, motivating them. We spoke about this earlier as well, you know, how do you convince researchers who are responsible for oftentimes, of course, the research, teaching and learning, administrative roles, to become involved in this additional process? It can be difficult to encourage them, to make them see the relevance for them. Yeah, I think that's something that's coming through very strongly, to engage researchers and to have participation across the entire community.
Yeah, sometimes a survey is not enough. Maybe you can say the same.
Yeah.
But I think that when you start involving researchers, maybe send an email to who would like to volunteer for some focus groups, they will be happy to actively participate. Above all, the research levels 1 and 2, they need for space to express their views. And maybe this is a good starting point.
Okay. Great. So we'll just move on perhaps to the final word cloud. And during the interim phase, again, challenges that spring to mind. Of course, this is different than getting the whole process up and running, and it is an exercise where you're reflecting and documenting the progress that you have made and the challenges that you have faced also. It can be difficult to find new actions.
Well, ask researchers.
Exactly. Yeah. Again,
yeah,
engagement.
indicators.
Yeah.
I insisted on indicators because sometimes what I notice in the initial phase and interim phase assessments is that indicators are not well defined. But actually, they are very, very important. It is not necessary to arrive to the expected indicators, but at least to provide some indicators and then try to follow the track, keep the track, monitor progress through indicators and not just through a published document or a deliverable, or maybe in case of a training course, not only the number of participants, but also maybe the rate of appreciation of this course, the usefulness of this course for them. Those can be useful indicators that then can be helpful in the interim phase, maybe to readjust your track and engagement, yeah.
I'd like to pick out two that spring to take my attention: half-finished actions, and there was lack of progress of some actions. Of course, it's a challenge if there's half-completed actions, but like Sylvia said, and I agree, it's not a problem. Because when assessors go to institutions or look at documentation submitted for this stage here, we're peer reviewers. So we understand from working in our own institutions that it's not reasonable to expect that everything is going to work successfully. Actions sometimes don't work, or there weren't the resources, but what is interesting is the discussion around that, why it didn't work. It's not a negative aspect, it's just an interesting observation and an interesting conversation piece. So I would say, as Sylvia said, don't shy away from what might be perceived as a weakness. It's just part of the process. Yeah,
exactly. It's like in research, sometimes a negative result can be a result. So it can help you to rethink the next actions, the needs.
Perfect. Are there any questions from people here in the audience? Nothing at the moment. Okay. Sylvia, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Oh, okay, thank you. Let me get some water.
Yes. Okay, and thank you very much, Sylvia. This brings us to the last and to the final presentation of the day. which will be dedicated. This one was on initial and interim phase, and we are going to have a look to renewal phase and site visits. And therefore, I invite to the stage Justin Sinnott, co-chair for today, who is a research partner at University College Dublin, Dublin, in research and innovation. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. In the microphone.
There's a moment that occurs at every site visit, and it's a moment in the process that I very much look forward to, and I'll describe it to you. It happens early in the day, and it happens just at the time that the assessment team arrive into the designated room, and everybody who should be in place at that particular time is in place and waiting. And it's a pivotal moment, because all of the preparatory work that has gone before at an institutional level, and also on the assessor's side of things, all that preparatory work has finished. And it's pivotal because we're just on the brink of what's going to be a long day of a series of meetings, taking a really deep dive into an institution's work over the last number of years, okay? And I enjoy that moment because you can feel a palpable sense of excitement in the room, a palpable sense of, well, concern, because people traditionally are concerned and somewhat frightened of site visits. Colleagues from Ireland will be familiar with the Irish term sketchamini áthas, right? Sketchamini means excitement. Áthas means joy or happiness, right? So sketchamini áthas is a sense of excitement, but also joy, right? I don't think any research performing organization would consider a site visit to be a joyful experience, okay? But at the beginning, I could understand, the beginning of the process, the beginning of the day, I could understand them not entering into it full of glee. But I think a good site visit will have aspects of joy throughout the day, and certainly by the end of the day, it's beneficial if institutions can leave that meeting with a sense of optimism, okay? Now, I thought about that word joy specifically, mixed with excitement, because it's one that in one shape or another I'll return to throughout the presentation, okay? So the focus of my presentation is to, skip back one slide. The focus of my presentation is to try to provide as much information as I can for organizations that are approaching the site visit, okay? I'll try to strike a balance between practical, logistical aspects, like the agenda, the day itself, but strike a balance between that and more comprehensive, qualitative aspects of the site visit. I was really heartened to see earlier on parts of the discussion around values and, you know, European values, institutional values. But the assessment team has a responsibility to bring certain values to the way that they work, okay? And what I'd like to do is that balance today between the practical and the pragmatic and the more, holistic approaches to the site visit. So how am I going to do that? Okay. So this is the structure of my presentation, and I am going to take a different tack than Daniel did with his German approach to slides. I have very few slides, and you'll even notice that my slides are sparse with words. But what I have done is, at the very end of my presentation, there's a QR code, and you can access all of my notes, bring them back to your institutions, share them as you like, because in those notes I do go into detail on all of these aspects here. Okay, so I'm going to begin by talking about, and taking Sylvia's lead, I'm going to continue that kind of chronological approach and specify exactly where the site visit occurs in the HR Excellence in Research life cycle, the cyclical life cycle. Okay, I'll point to that in a second. I thought it would be very useful for research performing organizations that are undergoing site visits to understand how we approach the day. Okay, why we're there, what we're trying to find out, how we go about our work. Okay, I want to, as I said, pragmatically talk about the site visit, the dynamics, the objectives. Okay, and I suppose the idea is that with those two pieces of information, it'll give you the tools that you need to prepare an institutional site visit in terms of the practicalities. So who you need to have in the room, what the agenda might look like for the day. How can you, in advance, prepare information that you know we want to hear about? So I'll give you all those details. And then, of course, having carried out, like Sylvia and others, a significant amount of visits over the last number of years, we have seen areas where there are pitfalls, where institutions, I would say, through no fault of their own or unbeknownst to themselves, might bring aspects along that prevent them presenting themselves in the best possible light, if that makes sense. So I'll talk about pitfalls, and then I'll also talk about successful aspects of a good site visit. And then I'm going to conclude a little bit and actually situate the site visit event as a kind of an aspect or an agent of the broader project that we've been talking about for the last number of days around the broadening and deepening of the European research area. Okay? Okay, so the site visit itself, Sylvia had presented this life cycle of the HR Excellence in Research process that we're familiar with, and where my presentation kicks in is after 5 years of the award being presented to an institution, okay? And this involves, of course, a visit that we'll describe in detail shortly. And after the site visit happens for the first time, it happens cyclically every 6 years, okay? And people, as I've said, and I've heard this from a few different quarters, are anxious and apprehensive about the site visit itself. But pictured like this, you could take a different perspective, which is that you are deeply embedded in a process that is running for a significant amount of time in your institution. And every 5 years and then every 6 years is actually a very small window of opportunity for you to have what is frankly a discussion with peers around the work that you're doing. So I try to kind of shift the balance and to think about the site visit as a positive opportunity for collaboration and discussion. So the site visit is a key component of the award renewal phase. And as I've mentioned, in the first instance, it occurs at the 5-year point. And then as we can see, 6 years thereafter. And as I've mentioned also, it's a peer-led, supportive discussion. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking about the event and thinking about that kind of meeting of the assessment panel with those people who are implementing the HR Excellence in Research process and their colleagues and their researchers. So broadly, it provides an opportunity to gain a better understanding of your achievements and your plans. We are tasked with providing recommendations based on the conversation and the dialogue that we have with you. And those recommendations, we would hope, can form part of a framework for decision-making and implementation of activities within your institution. And of course, it also practically informs the European Commission on the renewal decision. at the outset or as an outcome of the process. Okay. The assessors, the assessment team, our goal is to move beyond the desk-based research that we carry out prior to attending your institutions. So we spend a significant amount of time reading and discussing the documentation that you submit prior to the site visit. We want to conduct, as Sylvia said, an open, investigative, but supportive dialogue that lasts for the day, okay? It's important to say that we are excited to be there, okay? I mentioned this concept of like fun and joy. Well, it's a real privilege to talk to peers across Europe in really differing kinds of research performing organizations and to have a conversation with them about their work and to meet their colleagues. That's a privilege. So it's really exciting for us to be there. Just like you, we arrive with a sense of anticipation. The assessment team may not have met each other prior to that morning in person, although oftentimes we do converse prior to the site visit to make sure that our understanding is kind of one of consensus before we arrive at the door of the institution. I'm not being too light-hearted when I say that we act like anthropologists. We are in a foreign country, and the site visit is our opportunity for one day to carry out ethnographic fieldwork. And I mean that. I'll speak later on about the day itself, but one of the points that I'll make then is go for lunch with the assessment team, okay? If possible, take a short walk around the facilities. This is a really nice thing to do. It's collegial, but also it gives the assessment team the opportunity to talk by the water cooler. And if you meet a researcher in the corridor, well, you can chat to them as well, just about their experiences. But it's a very nice way of really getting under the fabric of an institution as anthropologists. Practically, it's a team of 2 to 3 external peers, and practically we are tasked with writing a report for the European Commission and a report, well, it's the same report, goes back to you in terms of observations and recommendations. Okay. So what do we want to understand? What are we tasked with when it comes to writing that report? This is in no particular order. It's reasonably long. And as I said, my notes are available at the end of the presentation, and I'm sure will be uploaded to the European Commission's webpage. So in no particular order, but there's some logic to this. We're very interested in this point that we were discussing earlier around leadership's commitment to the process, okay? And this is why, and I'll get into this in more detail later, it is essential at a site visit that the most senior leadership that you can bring to that meeting is there, okay? As you know yourselves, it just wouldn't look so good if the most senior leadership within your institution was unable to make it. This, again, I'll speak to later on when I'm talking about preparing the agenda for the day and doing that long in advance. We're interested in finding out views on how the leadership at the institution being reviewed allocates resources. Of course, a strategy, whether it be a human resources strategy or any other strategy, will fall flat on its face unless there are resources to carry out the strategy, to implement the actions. Even though actions aren't always expensive things to do, but they do need resourcing, and we're interested in finding out, is that happening at the institution? Similar to principles contained in the previous charter and code, we're very interested in making sure that researchers are involved in all parts of the process and at all stages of the researcher career. So of course we want to meet them on the day and they need to be involved in that, but we're really interested in making sure that they have participated in the development of your action plan, in identifying gaps, in naming actions. We're interested in your ambition, We're interested in what you've got planned for the future. It's not purely a retrospective exercise that we're involved in. And we do try to get a balance between understanding the journey that you have come on and where you're going in the future. And as I've mentioned, and I think Sylvia mentioned too, how ambitious that is in the context of your own institution. So as Sylvia mentioned, it's not a comparative exercise, but looking at the institution in front of us, we do really want to know, are the actions and the ambitions that you've got planned appropriate for the scale and the maturity of your exercise? Embeddedness is a word that crops up quite frequently, and we're interested in determining how embedded HR and excellence is, both in the policies of your institution. Anna mentioned earlier on bringing HR policies, organizational strategies, and HR and excellence in research all together. How do they inform each other? Can we see aspects of one in the other, etc.? So we're interested in that. We're not only interested in seeing how it's embedded in policy, but how it's embedded within the culture of your organization. Okay? And it's kind of intangible, but during the course of the day, and like good anthropologists, we pay attention to how people are interacting with each other. The relationship between researchers and senior management, academics and members of working groups. Okay? So we are interested in observing the continuous improvement in working methods and the maturity of your approach to the 4 significant pillars of what has been the Charter and Code, as I've mentioned, for the last 20 years. But those pillars of ethical and professional aspects, recruitment and OTMR, working conditions, development and training, they're all, as we've discussed over the last number of days, still contained in the new Charter for researchers. And we're interested in taking a deep dive on each of those aspects. Okay? Okay. So the day, in more practical terms, perhaps, and as I said, I do want to strike that balance between pragmatism and a more holistic observation. So the tone that we hope to bring to the meeting is friendly, constructive, and as Sylvia mentioned in her slides, supportive. Okay? It's a dialogue. It's a two-way dialogue, and we are primarily attending with the objective of listening and understanding. So a series of meetings happens throughout the day, starting early in the morning, most often that meeting where all of the senior management attend. It's that moment in that meeting where we embark on the day's discussion and we have that sense of anticipation. As I've mentioned, we meet with key stakeholders throughout the day, must include senior leadership, must include researchers. The day must allow for independent meetings where the assessment team can talk to researchers in the absence of other colleagues who are working in HR or other management units. So we can have open and frank discussions about the positive and negative aspects about working in a particular institution. So I would suggest that you're prepared for what we hope is an insightful discussion. We also would hope that sometimes it's a challenging discussion, because this is an important event that gives you the opportunity to describe your progress. And we have to scratch the surface a little bit and try to really figure out when something isn't going well, why is it not going well? As I mentioned earlier, when on the word cloud, people were talking about half-completed actions. Also, for example, when it comes to resourcing of actions, and if we're talking to senior management, it can become, not challenging or difficult, but it can become quite a focused conversation in terms of the ambition that they have for the completion of the strategy. We also quite often will have specific things that we want to discuss based on our review of the documentation that you have submitted and that we have read in detail before we arrive. And this forms a lot of the correspondence as we would have as assessors, where we notice something, we oftentimes notice different things, but we say, look, a priority for me is to find out why this and why that, or what's the real description of a particular thing, because I can't get a sense from the documentation. So during the day, the discussion might focus on particular activities, and they can often be particular cases of really good practice that we want to find out more about. And on that point, part of the day, I would suggest, is this opportunity for you to showcase your success, as well as reflecting on challenges openly and honestly. So remember that this report that's written is given to the European Commission, it goes back to you. It can be a really nice endorsement if you've done something well that you're proud of, to see that captured by external peer reviewers and brought back to your institution. And politically, it can be very useful if you want to do it again, because you have this endorsement from an external peer reviewer. So the outcome of the event is a preliminary verbal feedback at the very end of the day, followed by this written report. And the report indicates a number of options, which I'll get to just in a moment. On the verbal feedback that comes at the end of the day, personally, I approach that with caution. And I approach that with a degree of respect for the institution that I am working with. And the reason being is because for everybody involved, there's no way around this. It's a really, really intensive day, okay? And you have arrived at the door of this institution that you've never been to before. You're trying to understand how the institution hangs together. You're trying to have a deep dive on a number of topics. And at the same time, you're noting a number of areas of good practice. As anthropologists, we listen for those things that go without saying. Those kind of off-the-cuff remarks that people make, and I really sort of hone in on those. Recently at an institution, somebody said, and I think it was actually during the lunch break, yes, when it comes to X, Y, and Z, we are pioneers. And they said it with sincerity, and I kind of noted that, and I thought, I agree with that, and I think that that's something that you should be proud of, and I wrote that into the report as a kind of an observation on the way that they approach things. They said it in passing, but it actually captured a lot of the way that they're working at the institution. So it's an opportunity for you to celebrate success, to document good practice. It's an opportunity for us, as I said, to write the report, but we do that carefully. And that meeting at the end of the day is really just to summarize observations. We might allude to something that we've spotted. Off the top of my head, I'll say, for example, the example of declining numbers of international researchers. Okay? We understand that if that's happening at an institution, they're very much aware of it. So as an assessor, I'm careful and cautious in what recommendation I make about that, because I know that they know their work a hell of a lot better than I do at that institution. And one of the things that I can do in that situation is endorse their endeavours to try to overcome that challenge, rather than say, well, I recommend that you firmly do this and then your problem will be solved. I hope I'm communicating that clearly enough. So the outcome is a report, as I've mentioned, and the possible specific outcome for the institution is that the report is successful, the site visit is successful, and they are approved to maintain the award. The other alternative is that they are approved, but they have to make pending minor alterations. I think there's a period of 2 months given for this. And then there's an alternative outcome, which is that there are major alterations to be made, and there's an extended period of time for that to happen. In all cases, recommendations are made to the institution. Even institutions that are really, really excellent and strong and successfully implementing the process, we try to provide some sort of constructive feedback that they can take, even if it is, for want of a better expression, keep doing what you're doing. But that in itself can be very useful for an institution. Okay. So I suppose the idea here is that based on what I've said, how can you as institutions prepare practically and the logistical aspects to it? Okay. Engage as early as you possibly can with the lead assessor who is assigned to your site visit. And this is a message for Michaela probably more than anybody else. But in my ideal version of the world, if there are institutions that are going to be assessed in 2026, let's start talking about it now in terms of pinning down a date. Because it is impossible to get everybody in the room on a particular day, even if it is September or October of next year, okay? So whenever you have the opportunity, engage actively with the lead assessor assigned to your case. In correspondence with the assessor, you can agree an agenda for the day, okay? As I said, I don't think there's any way of getting around the fact that there's going to be a lot of meetings on the day in order for you to demonstrate your strengths and in order for the assessors to do their job properly. But because you have to bring in, as I've mentioned a number of times, the most senior management, the coordinators of the HR Excellence in Research, researchers themselves, and other stakeholders, that can be really challenging. So start working on that as early as you possibly can. The agenda can be agreed with you and the lead assessor, and the lead assessor will be feeding back progress on that to the other people on the assessment team. And it's a collaborative exercise. By all means, suggest what you think would be a good day. Provide that to the assessor. They might say, yes, I'm interested in this, but I don't think we've got time for that. And they will sort of maybe imprint some aspects that they really want to discuss more deeply. You can set out a broad structure. And I always say to institutions, closer to the time, we might actually change the topic of one of the meetings because having carried out our review of the documentation submitted, we're actually really interested in exploring one or two things. So there has to be a bit of flexibility around that. I suggest that the meetings begin with a short presentation by each of the different stakeholder groups. And I think that that's a very useful way, and it's a very kind of fair way to give you the opportunity to set the scene as you want it set for a particular topic. So if we're talking about training and career development as a session, well, try to give a potted version of your view on that with a short presentation, highlighting, as we've been discussing, successful aspects of your work and challenging aspects of your work around that particular topic. And that also, allows you to set the scene, but it opens up a really, really important part of the process, which is a dialogue between you and the assessment team. I've mentioned also, striking the correct balance between your past experiences and your future plans. I think that this is really, really important. We're not there to historically walk through the last 5 years of your implementation because it's just not possible and it's not fruitful or productive. So we encourage you to think creatively around how you can communicate and kind of distill the work that you've been doing around particular topics as you see fit, and then communicate that to us as an exercise in developing a dialogue around that particular topic. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about pitfalls before, of course, moving on to the more positive and optimistic aspect of successful aspects of site visits. The first thing that I do when I'm asked to review an institution is look at them on the web. And a number of times, the documentation or the part of their website dedicated to HR and excellence is not functional or significantly outdated or doesn't have the logo. To me, it's surprising, But that's the first thing I do. So I would encourage institutions early on an ongoing basis, just make sure that your web page is up to date, because it's our first port of call. At the meeting itself, this idea of, well, it's an exercise in simplification, it's an exercise in distilling the information, but failing to kind of contextualize your evolution or communicating your evolution in a convoluted way just makes it difficult for the assessment team to make a really clear call on how an institution is progressing. So just try to be, in all regards, and I say this with respect, but when it comes to the meeting, try to present things as concisely as you can. And I'll reflect on that in a moment when I talk about successful aspects of a site visit. Action plans, and we've mentioned this before, can include indicators that are hard to measure, okay? Purely qualitative, lacking in quantitative goals. And at the meeting itself, it's very important to move beyond the actions within the action plan and to demonstrate the impact of the actions, okay? So just like research impact, we can't just say this is what happened, this was the outcome. We're more interested in saying, well, what changed around a particular action for the researchers at your institution? Over-prepared or disengaged researchers. I've yet to, well, let me put it this way. We meet researchers at R1 to R4, depending on the institution itself. That could be one meeting with R1 and R2, and then another meeting with R3 and R4, but it's always independent of management. I would suggest to people that if they're picking researchers to come along and represent the organization, don't prep them. You know, the only preparation I would encourage you to do is to say to them, before this meeting, I would like you to think critically about your experience in this institution, okay? And the reason that I focus on that is because more often than not, researchers will talk about the positive aspects of working in their institution. I remember recently on that particular part of the meeting, I opened up my ledger and I had plus and minus. And after talking and probing for 45 minutes, I had nothing in the debit ledger side of my document. So I had to stop and say, look, you can't be telling me that like everything is rosy and that everything, like, so I had to say, okay, I'm not going to ask you any more positive aspects. I need you to tell me what has to be improved in this institution for your career as a researcher to be supported and developed, okay? So to go back to my original point, ask your researcher colleagues to attend and ask them to critically reflect on their experience, both positive and negative. Okay. Some positive aspects of a successful site visit. You're the experts on your institution, so we rely on you to confidently guide us through the day, describing your challenges, highlighting your successes, reflecting on the past, and developing a vision for the future. We want to maximize open discussion, so those presentations that I mentioned at the beginning are a good idea, but keep them brief so conversation can have most of the time of the meeting. Importantly, and this is to reflect back on my notion of joy and fun, showcase your best practices and celebrate your successes. Institutions, and again, I think this is a kind of a cultural thing, but sometimes organizations tend not to say confidently, we did this and it worked really well. And now we are, as I mentioned earlier, pioneers. So use the opportunity to celebrate your successes. Demonstrate the evolution of actions, okay? Many institutions can have tens and tens of actions, and some of them, of course, are completed and some of them are ongoing, etc. But I think what's more interesting is to look at an institution and say, and this is to really identify the HR excellence nerds, what's your favorite action? Right? It's a good question, But what I'm interested in finding out is really, and I encourage people to use a model like this, it's kind of like a growth mentality, but something along the lines of situation, complication, solution. Okay? So I would encourage institutions at several times during the day to say, okay, we had a situation, and again, I'll think off the top of my head, the numbers of international researchers were declining at our institution. So the complication was that at a legislative level, the numbers of visas being allocated for researchers has been cut significantly. So the solution that we came up with is, and this is again, I'm just making this up, we ensured that all of our international researchers that were currently here, where possible, were given extensions to their contract or whatever the situation might be. But I like to see a lived example of an action from start to finish. And then you can start to talk about the changes that have come about because of that action being implemented. A successful site visit will really clearly demonstrate also why an action is an action. Where did it come from? Why did you prioritize that? Who's it helping? How is it helping them? If I ask that researcher later on this afternoon, talk to me about that, will they be familiar with, maybe not the action or the plan, but will they be familiar with the content? And can I verify that from other people? So the life cycle of an action, where it came from, its evolution, what changed, it can be a very pragmatic and practical way to explain to an external person how your action plan works in everyday life. So another aspect, and I'll complete with these just in a moment, of a successful site visit is evidence. Okay, so if you want to bring additional files, charts, case studies are super helpful. Use those in the day to articulate your case. Okay, I'm going to finish in a moment. I want to conclude by reflecting on the site visit. At the beginning of the presentation, I situated it following Sylvia's lead, kind of in a chronology of events, okay, the 5-year mark and then subsequently the 6-year mark. But now I want to situate the site visit in a much broader context. So we have been talking for the last number of days, indeed many, many years, about the research area, the European research area, and how it seeks to create a unified research market, strengthen science, and address societal challenges. And the objectives, as we are familiar with, include attractive research careers, skills development, gender equality, free movement of researchers, the uptake of researchers' outputs in the economy and society. We've spoken this morning about academia and industry transfer and mobility and cooperation. The HR Excellence in Research Award is a key mechanism in implementing these objectives and reaching these objectives. In my view, the site visit is the ERA writ small, okay? You could picture a kind of a global perspective of Europe and little nodes all across the continent as site visits take place, okay? And I think through these interactions, we are pursuing the objectives of the European research area. So for research performing organizations, it gives you the opportunity, as I've discussed, to demonstrate continuous improvement. For assessors, we can support research performing organizations by trying to share best practice and to provide a framework in the form of our feedback and our report, which may be used for you as a mechanism for decision-making and progress in the future. And for the European Commission, it gives them the opportunity to observe local contributions to building a more sustainable, excellent, and open research environment. So I'll finish by saying that the site visit can be seen then as a unique peer-to-peer opportunity. We can't live in fear. It only comes around every number of years. It gives you the opportunity to showcase your strengths, your progress, your commitment, gain valuable feedback for future planning, and set the course for your direction for the next 3 to 6 years of enhancing the research environment for your researchers. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
You can stay on stage. I will. Can we put a slide on? It's very late. We are going to close in a little bit, but we're going to take a few questions first. There were a lot of questions coming up online, and if there are any questions from the audience as well. But first, a couple of Sylvia, do you want to join us? We give a global perspective from the assessors. Okay, first question. Now, what are the main obstacles from the point of view of the institution that are faced at a renewal level, a renewal phase? We have seen the initial phase, the interim phase, now at the renewal phase. Lack of engagement. The public can take the slide as well. Engagement seems to be the key word here. You have your microphone on the table.
That's me, Justin. I said, that's me, Justin. No coaching or researchers. Convince the team.
You want to take it? The first one to comment already? It's already on.
Okay. Then I will pass to Justin for the renewal phase. But I note that there is a re-engagement or lack of engagement. So, of course, the ideal situation is the situation in which the engagement is continuous, which takes time, commitment, effort. But I think that with a both top-down approach from the governance, but also bottom-up approach for the research community, engagement can be continuously kept on.
I would just briefly, I agree with all of these comments here and the theme that's emerging. I think it's important to recognize that, as you all know, implementing this process is labor intensive and it resource heavy, okay? And I think that that's something like we ask on approach to the site visit, you know, how did you go about preparing for this? And the efforts that people have to go to are lengthy. So I think just to reflect back on that kind of model where the mandate for implementing the HR in excellence in research, the mandate has to come from the top, but it has to include significant leadership at all parts of the institution. And I think with that, institutions must have an open and honest discussion about the fact that if we're going to be invested in this, we have to recognize the fact that there's a significant overhead in doing it, as I've mentioned. I think if that isn't widely known or accepted or acknowledged, it can often mean that the individual or the unit that's tasked with implementation is carrying all of the weight. And that's not good at all, of course.
And well, if I can say something, I'm not an assessor, but I am on this file since quite a while. And one important mistake is done sometime is to look at the HRS Excellence in Research, formerly HRS for our process, as a box-ticking exercise. Nothing is more different than that. It's a long-term commitment. Unlike a box-ticking exercise, an institution cannot start preparing engagement on the last 5 months. It is something that must be there constantly and ongoing. And it is a cyclical and incremental process lasting many years. Therefore, the engagement is something that is built on the go and increase over time. It cannot be generated on the spot. Can we go to the second slide of question? Okay. What is the most important aspect of the preparation for the site is from the point of view, we heard about the assessing team point of view, from the point of view of the institution. Let's wait. Communication. Storytelling. Engagement. Okay. I think this is very important because it gives us the perspective on the other side, so that we sometimes we don't, we are not shown that we have that. Because of course when you go for the site visit, good lunch. Okay, I will pass that information to the organizers. Thanks. Okay. What do you think about it?
I really, really like all of the responses. Storytelling, I wish that I had used that in my presentation because it captures really well what an institution is tasked with doing. From my perspective, I think like dialogue is hugely important, and it can mean different things at different parts of the process. But for me, planning the agenda with a healthy dialogue with the institution in advance is the basis from which you're going to work. So it's hugely important. Early iterations of agendas can often just say, well, we'll begin at 8:45 and we'll finish at whatever time, and we're going to have these people, and even might say, and they're from this department or that, and immediately I go back and say, what is the purpose of this meeting? Like, what are we going to discuss? Because that's what you really have to iron out in advance of the day itself. And that also, if you are precise like that, it gives the institution the opportunity to really plan accordingly. And it makes sure that as assessors you're covering, or you know that you're going to cover all of the areas you want to discuss. So dialogue, in addition to all of these really good suggestions, I think.
If I can add something, I think that engaging the stakeholders and also communication, above all internal communication, are strictly connected. Because sometimes there are many implemented actions, ongoing actions, but sometimes researchers, they do not know that they come from the HR process. So sometimes it is a matter also of internal communication, which takes time, it takes some efforts, and also a strategic view on the HR process itself. But then that's the way the HR process becomes widespread in the institution. It improves the engagement, but also communication.
Now, I do not remember, do we have a third slide? Okay, can you put the questions on screen? We have a few questions that I already collected from the colleague which are online. I wonder, do you have any question from the audience here? Okay, already one. Then, of course, we go there.
Thank you. That was wonderful to hear about, I guess, how the assessors approach it. I'm asking both of you, have you ever been involved in a virtual visit? Because clearly we won't be able to give you a great lunch. And also for those of us that aren't even in the same time zone, a whole day is not going to work. So what are your key insights around how do we make that experience as rich as we can for the assessors when it is a virtual visit?
Yeah, so during COVID, during COVID, site visits were virtual and challenging. Yeah. So I think for many reasons we're all glad that that time has passed. I think your idea, based in Australia, of carving up the meeting into a number of smaller meetings is really positive for people, you know, time zones taken into consideration. I think it's a challenge, but it forces, I suppose, both the assessment team and yourselves or institutions that are at a distance to really just put a lot into the planning of it. And so to just underline the things I'd mentioned before around setting the agenda and making sure that what is going to be covered is relevant and precise. The use of presentations actually is a real bonus in this kind of situation. But again, it's all about dialogue and conversation and discussion. So use the presentations as an entry into, you know, the topic. I think as well what's interesting, I suppose, that for European assessors, they may not be familiar with the Australian system. So the presentation that you gave earlier on, Jane, was really great, even for myself to understand Athena Swan in an Australian context, SAGE, etc., which I hadn't been aware of before. So there might be some work in addition just to kind of set the scene so the assessors can hit the ground running when they do join you, albeit virtually. Yeah.
We have here, sorry, Sylvia, you want to add something?
No, I think that's...
Okay.
That's
We
it.
have here a couple of questions that are very technical, so I will answer very fast. It's not after the first renewal, how should we prepare the report for the next review without the site visit? Are there new questions or same structure of the previous report? The e-tool set of questions will be exactly the same. The only difference is that we will not have the site visit. Okay. And then could we propose some dates to the lead assessor, or how we finalize the calendar for the site visit? This is a good proposal, and I will take it into consideration. And that reminds me that I have to make a point, because I keep forgetting to mention it. Sorry, it's so late in the day. Huge backlog of the European Commission. There are a lot of site visits that has been postponed. Do not worry. These institutions, these cases are not falling out of the system. They are still in the system. They are still awarded. It's a responsibility of the Commission and that's part of the externalization of the administrative process. We have done that so that the full load of this administrative burden will be managed, and priority to the company who will take on board the externalization PMI in 2026, full priority will be given to the absorption of the backlog. So in due time, you will be contacted with, there will be a liaison between PPMI and the institution waiting for the site visit to finalize the site visit. Are there any other questions apart that?
Question from
Yes,
Connor.
Okay, Connor, there is a question here. Sorry, I have the lights. We don't see very well.
Thank you. More a comment than a question. And it was, I would really like to endorse what Justin said about the anthropological aspect of the site visit, because one thing you learn very quickly when you arrive in the institution is how well connected people are into the process. In the very first presentation, you really get a sense of this. And throughout the meetings, you find out, especially with those people in the more peripheral areas, say in HR, that how well are they connected in technology transfer into the system. The other thing, I mean, just, you know, a case in point, an example for me was a couple of years ago, I led a site visit to the CNRS in Paris, which is a vast organization. The CEO remained with us for the entire day. And he stepped in and out a bit, but he was pretty much there throughout the day. And they'd all of their senior people. You could really see there was a sense of cohesion and understanding of that. So immediately you got a sense, yes, it works. And the other really valuable part is meeting the researchers separately. Because you actually find out what really goes on. Because, you know, the first part of the site visit, it's all wonderful. This is a wonderful institution. We do everything for the researchers. And then you talk to the researchers. And, you know, it's a balance. You always hear all the various things. And sometimes you have to filter it, especially with the more senior academics, because they often have long-standing enmities and issues within the organization. But I do think, like, I must say, in terms of the virtual site visits, when we had to do it through COVID, it was a real disadvantage because you couldn't get that connection in a way. And in fact, I think any of us who did it may have made the mistake by just trying to run the same thing as a real site visit all in the day. Probably taking some more time would have made a lot more sense to take a little bit more time on it. But yeah, it's a really valuable part of the process. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you, Connor. Do you want to have a last round of comments? Because I guess we have, unless we have more questions from the floor. I don't see anybody, so if you want to give a last round of comments before we can close the procedure.
Just one point from myself, and I hope that I conveyed this throughout my presentation. This is a collective opportunity amongst peers to discuss how we can best progress our institutions to support the development of researcher careers. So it's a collective ambition, and I really think that it's useful to move away from this idea that the site visit is something to be feared and something to be, you know, put off and pushed out into the calendar. It can and it should be, and it oftentimes is, a very positive experience for all involved.
On my side, I speak for the initial and interim phase. Yesterday we saw some figures about the institutions involved in the HR process in various countries in Europe, and some of them has a very, very low rate of institution participating. I hope this meeting today can be an encouraging moment to try to take the first steps towards this process, because it is true, it is time consuming, it requires an effort at the beginning from the institutions, the governance, the research community, but then it's really, really rewarding, as all the testimonies this morning have taught us.
Thank you very much. So it was really an engaging day. We're full of extremely interesting presentation and discussions. One thing I will take with me is the complexity, the richness of the landscape out there in terms of intersectorality, interdisciplinarity, geographical differences. I mean, it's the beauty of this. For me, it's a file, and the dossier is a project, but it's also more than that. So it is really an exciting and extremely engaging process that we are working on, and that's thanks to you all, not only to the assessors. I think that the main thank should go to the institution involved in this process. And I am very, very positively looking at the years coming, because with the help of PPMI, which is taking a huge burden, the Commission will be able to do a lot more from the policy and the organizational point of view. So thank you so much to all of you and to all our presenters, and I hope to see you next year at another Info Day, and all the proceedings of this Info Day will be, of course, online. Okay. Thank you so much.